Now that we have Node installed and we have the ability to now execute code, JavaScript code, on our machine, let's go ahead and write our first application using JavaScript and Node. Let's go ahead and open up command prompt. So down in your search, look for CMD, so command prompt app, open it up. And let's make sure that Node, of course, is still active. So let's do node -v, see what the version is. As expected, Node is not recognized, so we need to do our Node version switcher. And then we need to select the node we want, and we're going to go with the 12.11.1, which is the current. Hit enter, and now when we do node -v, we should be able to get the version 12.11.1. Excellent. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and we are going to write our first application using JavaScript with Node. And the funny thing is, we're going to do it right in the command prompt. In order to execute JavaScript code in the command prompt live with Node, we can go ahead and just type Node. And what this does is it opens up the Node virtual machine. It's not really called a virtual machine, but it is a virtual execution environment that is now running within your terminal. In other words, right now we have our greater than symbol right here, or less than symbol, and we've got a blinking cursor, and Node is actually waiting for us to do line by line input into the execution environment for Node to transpile that down into machine code and then execute that for us live and just in time as we are typing code. So for our first program, we're going to do the common hello world, but instead we're doing hello Bob. And to do that, all we really need to do is in Node, as a string, let's type in hello Bob. Now, of course, JavaScript strings, you wrap them in quotes, and you haven't gotten that far yet, but this is how you create a string in JavaScript. And you can just type hello Bob. When you hit enter, the hello Bob code, which is what we wrote on this line, is sent into the interpreter. It translates it from JavaScript to the machine code that Node uses to communicate directly with the operating system. Of course, that's kind of a high-level description. It's more complex than that. It then modifies that, and then it returns the action. And in our terminal, we actually see the hello Bob being printed out to our terminal as a result of that interaction with Node, the operating system, and then compiling that code, executing the code, and then printing it out in our terminal as an actual terminal message. So that right there is our very first application. Really, really simple. You can see that Node really isn't that difficult. Once you've got it installed and it's running on your machine, you can simply call Node and then get the live terminal for scripting, or the live execution environment. And then you can just start writing JavaScript code. So here we've got a string, we execute it, comes back as Bob as a statement in our terminal, in our command prompt. Another, a little more complex, would be to create a variable. So let say something equal, and then hello Bob. Right here, we're creating a JavaScript statement. We got a variable using the keyword let. The name of our variable, the storage bucket that we're going to put the string hello Bob in. The equal sign, which is the assignment operator, puts the hello Bob string inside of the variable, and then we got a semicolon that terminates the statement. We hit enter. We've got undefined because the result of any statement in JavaScript returns undefined unless we return something ourselves. So now we're sitting here and we've got a variable that now has that value in it that's sitting inside of the Node execution environment, sitting on the stack, which means we can call that back, that variable, say something, and we can execute it, and that value gets printed out to our command prompt. So here is a basic live real-time execution of JavaScript within the Node engine. All right. The next step we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create a JavaScript file that does the same thing and then execute that file instead of doing it inside of our live command prompt. So we can just go ahead and do a Control-C a couple of times, and that'll get us out of the live JavaScript execution environment within Node. Now we're back to just our regular command prompt, and we are in users Tim. So if we use the dir command, we can see what other folders we have. And if we want to, we can go to our documents. So change directory and then do our documents folder. And now we're inside of our documents folder. So we can do dir, and we can see that our documents folder doesn't have anything in it. What we did just now is we pretty much just went to our documents folder right here on our computer. And with that, if we follow this path down here inside of our command prompt, we can actually follow that path. So if we go to this PC, we go to the C drive, we go to users, we go to Tim, and we find the documents folder right there. Now we are inside of the documents folder for our user. In here, we could, if we want, create a JavaScript file that we can execute with Node that does the same thing as what we did live inside of our command prompt. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and let's search down here in our search, and let's search for Notepad. So Notepad, open up Notepad. Notepad is just a basic text editor. You could write entire applications in just Notepad, but that would be painful. But for this example, we're just going to go ahead and do a small one. So let's do the same code we did before, and let's say hello Bob. And then let's put it in a variable. Let say something equals hello Bob. Terminate with that semicolon. And then in our terminal, when we had the live session going with Node, we went ahead and typed say something in order to use that variable. Let's see what this does. So we're going to go ahead and save it. We're going to save it to our documents folder, and we're going to use the same path that we had down there. So C, users, Tim, documents, and then we're going to name it, but instead of using .txt, because this is JavaScript code that we're going to execute, we're going to use the file extension .js. So we're going to say my first app.js. Go ahead and save that. Now, when we come back to our terminal and we do dir, we should see that file right here, myfirstapp.js. Previously, to get into the Node live execution environment, we just simply typed Node and hit enter, and that put us into a live JavaScript execution environment within our command prompt. Here, though, we don't want to do that. We want to simply execute our file, myfirstapp.js. To do that, all we have to do is be relative to this file, meaning that we are currently inside of that file, that folder, the documents folder in our command prompt. And then by saying node and then the name of our file right here, we can actually execute that JavaScript file. So we type my music, we type myfirstapp.js, and when we hit enter, it's going to execute that file within Node, and instead of it being a live interactive execution environment, it's going to load Node, it's going to load that file in, compile it, turn it into what it needs to in order to talk to the machine, and then do something with it. Funny thing is that because we're executing this directly with Node, we actually don't get any output right here because it's just simply executing that particular file inside of Node. So it's not interactive like we saw before. But we do know that we didn't get any errors back. Therefore, our file did indeed run with inside of Node. It just ran outside of our command prompt itself. Now we could see if we couldn't get it to actually spit some information out. And we can do that by perhaps typing console.log and then our variable of say something. Save that and then rerun our script. Oh, and here we go. Now we've got some output. The reason why we got output now and we've modified our code a little bit is because in the interactive shell, when we're actually running Node, it will actually, after it executes a statement, it'll put out the results of the execution of that statement, which doesn't normally happen when a file of JavaScript gets executed. That is just providing us instantaneous feedback that statements are being executed when we're in the interactive environment for Node inside of our command prompt. In order to get it to actually spit stuff out to our command prompt when we are executing a file by itself, we need to use console.log, and console is an object that allows us to log information directly back to our command prompt. So now with that console.log and we're passing it this say something variable, it knows how to look inside of that variable, pull out what is stuffed inside of it, and then print it to the console. So now every time we run node my first app, we're going to go ahead and get that hello Bob. If we wanted to modify it just a little bit more, we can open back up our source file and we could do another console.log and this time put in some other information directly as a string. This is my first app and it is really cool. And then we go ahead and close that, save it, make sure you save the file. And now when we run it, we should get hello Bob, and then this is my first app, and it is really cool. All right, so that is executing Node for an interactive environment directly inside of your command prompt, and then using Node as the actual execution environment itself to execute a JavaScript file. Now, as we build more complex JavaScript applications, we will be executing them using Node and then passing it a default entry point into our application, which is usually index.js. And we'll get to that when we start building more complex Node applications as we move forward.